All right, beginning in the Middle East, U.S. forces conducting a fourth night of crushing strikes against Iran.
And President Trump says next week will be even worse if Tehran doesn't come to the table soon.
Mike Tobin joins us live. He's in Tel Aviv, and he's got the latest. Mike?
Good morning, Joey. Good morning, gang. The U.S. blockade is now in place. And President Trump says what that means is that the strait is open with the exception of any ship that visits an Iranian port. What we've seen from both Iran and the U.S. now is an increase in strikes. U.S. Central Command says they've wrapped up another round of strikes inside of Iran. The targets have been Iranian missile and drone sites, naval capabilities, and coastal defense sites. And this follows 7 commercial ships that have been struck crossing the Strait of Hormuz. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper gave a number we haven't heard yet. Nearly a dozen civilian crew members killed, missing, or injured by the Iranian strikes. And he added, U.S. forces are holding Iran accountable for unwarranted aggression that continues to endanger innocent lives. 137 days into this conflict, with the Trump reportedly holding meetings in the Situation Room about expanding the U.S. offensive in Iran, the president told our Trey Yingst, Kharg Island is still a possibility.
Are you ruling out a ground campaign in a limited capacity?
I don't want to say that either, but I would say no if I thought it was appropriate. I'd say sometimes you need a ground campaign, but we have other people that will do the ground campaign for us. But we already hit Kharg Island. As far as taking it is concerned, if we degrade them far enough and deep enough back, I would do that.
We have video of an Iranian Shahed drone striking a target in Kuwait. There is some reporting that that target was a U.S. base, but I should note that is not confirmed. Iran has insisted they are not firing at their neighbors, but firing at U.S. targets in those countries. Bahrain took some fire today. It says aggressive aerial attacks were intercepted. Also, a drone came down in Iraq. No reports of injuries. Guys, back to you.
All right, thanks so much, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
You know, I'm sorry, at some point you run out of targets. And I think what you've seen the president is he's hitting these weapon facilities, these different areas that we have once hit before that they started to reconstitute. But the president made the point with Trey Yingst yesterday. At some point you get bridge and power plant day. If the Iranians don't come to the negotiating table, they've shown no willingness to do it. The deal is pretty much over, the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding. And so I think we eventually are going to see that escalation.
Joey, with your military experience, a meeting in the Situation Room, that tells me it's classified, it's anti-eavesdropping, it's highly sensitive, time-critical national security issue. Yeah,
so the president's got 2 things happening at once. On one side, he's keeping his cards close to the vest as far as what they're actually going to do. On the other side, one thing this president does that maybe presidents in the past haven't done is he uses posturing. When he says next week is bridge and power plant day, that's not a message to the American people. That's not a message to the American military. That's a message to Iran. The hope is it doesn't have to get to that. The problem is when you make a threat like that, you have to fulfill it, and President Trump is known for doing that. And so, does Iran push President Trump to that point? It matters because that is infrastructure that affects civilians in their life. And there are areas of Iran that are being affected by this that don't support the regime and don't support anything that's happening. It's a complicated answer, but when we have a chance to talk to Trey Yingst in a little bit, the real question is if we have the ability, because Lawrence, you talk about run out of targets, if we have the ability to truly decimate their ability to attack anything in the Strait, why did we even have a memorandum of understanding to begin with? Why did we ever go there? There's only 2 answers there. One is the cost to us is so great that we don't want to have to do it. When I say cost, I mean like bombs and bullets and blood.
Right.
Or the other is we don't quite have that capability the way we want or the administration wants to project. And I don't mean that we couldn't, but the timeline it would take to get there is much longer.
Well, and it's also a president, to your point, just to build on that, Joe, there's 2 things that's impacted him the way he's handled this war. It's one, obviously, he doesn't want to hit the Iranian civilians. You don't want to make that problem worse. You've seen 30,000 of them already been killed by the regime there. So the president wants to support them. But number 2, some people have talked about the president taking Kharg Island or going to get the nuclear dust, and that will require ground troops to be able to do that the right way. And there could be casualties, and the president has made it very clear he doesn't want to have to do that unless it's absolutely necessary. The question is, since the Iranians have a vote will they push the president in that direction? And that's something we just don't know yet.
Yeah, it would affect a lot of the civilians if he destroyed the infrastructure, and that's what he doesn't want to do, but he's not afraid to do it if he has to.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.